So I'm really pleased to have the panelists that are here today. People I've known and respected for a long time, and I'm sure we're going to have an interesting conversation about coaching senior women leaders today as well. So what I thought to start this session was just we could do some short introductions, just so that the audience get to hear a bit about you. So Helen, if I came to you first, would you be happy to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everybody. So I'm Helen Cowan. I've been a coach for about 10 years now. And prior to being a coach, I spent most of my life in financial services, but then I saw the light and retrained, thanks to Damion. I now run a business called The Tall Wall, which I founded 8 years ago, and we specialize in professional and financial services. And a lot of the work that we do is with senior women. So much of our work is through a gender lens. It matters to me a great deal that I'm supporting women, not least because I have an 11-year-old daughter and she will have all this to come. So I'd like to say I did my bit. So it's a pleasure to be here with you all today.
Thanks, Helen. Thank you. Caroline, if I come to you next.
Thanks, Damion. Hi, everybody. So I'm Caroline Brown. I'm a senior coach practitioner with the MCC, having done my training and supervision with Damion since 2015. You've been putting up with me nearly 10 years, Damion. I work for Atkins Realis. That's a global engineering services and nuclear organisation. I've been there 27 years, so joined as a mechanical engineer, then went on to sort of typical business head roles. Later helped to set up our very first internal coaching cadre. And now my role is about heading up behaviour and culture transformation for our nuclear and power EMEA business. I do a little bit of work alongside my Atkins work, just for a bit of variety and difference, really. So some coaching and facilitation with Emily, an occupational psychologist who I co-authored a book with around strengths-based organisations.
Lovely. Thanks, Caroline. And Nish, if I come over to you.
Oh, thank you, Damion. Hi, everyone. I'm Nish. I've been an executive coach for 15 years now, I think. And part of my career I spent in KPMG, working in-house. And for a chunk of that time, co-led the team on the strategy for the business. I now work in-house for a financial services organisation, where I get to work with fewer women than I would like. I think that's part of the conversation today, so I'm looking forward to exploring that with you. But I also do some private work, and I get a bit more balance through that. And I also support other coaches in their learning and development.
Thanks, Nish. And Sarah.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah. I've been a coach for about 10 years now. I currently work in Thales, technology, engineering, defence, and I've come to it through a very wiggly career path. I coach mainly internal leaders and teams and supporting the other coaches, both in the organisation and out. This is a subject I feel very connected to, as I've spent almost all of my career in male-dominated environments, from the military through to engineering. I like to focus on helping women and women leaders, but also I've found myself helping their male colleagues to support them too. And I think that's part of the conversation that we should be having.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. So I'm really interested in getting into the conversation, actually, and I just want to say this topic really came up from our alumni, I have quite regularly I have conversations with people that are interested in becoming coaches, and when I'm talking to them about, I suppose, their motivation, for a lot of them, they're sharing that actually as a leader, they're now thinking about the support they would like to offer the people that are coming up behind them. And for a lot of them, they're women, and they will often talk to me about the challenges that they faced, and that's why they really want to offer this support through coaching now. So I thought we'd start with a question, because I know people are interested to think about the types of conversations you may be having with women in leadership roles. So, Carol, I'm going to start with you, actually, for this first question, which is really about what are the themes that you're seeing as an executive coach working in this area?
There's probably the classic ones that you're expecting me to say, like work-life balance, juggling home and work, and quite often part-time or flexible roles or multiple roles. lack of visible role models above them, those impacting vision, imposter syndrome and confidence, and quite often those are actually narratives that they've been told as opposed to maybe feeling themselves. So it might be that they've had successive bosses saying, well, you're brilliant, you should just have a bit more confidence. Well, maybe that's the problem, rather than that they're lacking in confidence because they've already done quite well. And so often there's things around, I think I find senior women struggling with the kind of progression levels, and really having the space and time to think about what are their goals, versus what are other goals. I think successful women can be kind of encouraged and pushed and encouraged on, and end up being fairly in service to other people's goals quite often. So quite an interesting one there around own goals versus other goals, and ambition versus balance, and how to sort of have all of this together in what can be a bit of a melting pot of frustration sometimes, I think. So often women presenting with struggling to be able to ask for what they want, not wanting to be too special in asking for special treatments, and either in a case of being maybe too visible, as in they, you know, in our as particularly technical organizations, very good women and quite visible for being a woman and being really encouraged and pushed quite heavily, or finding that they're invisible and needing to fit in, and struggling with that. So I think that range probably sums it up.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, so actually, you know, really helpful broad view. Nish, I'm going to come to you next, just in terms of, from your experience, what you'd like to add.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo a lot of what Caroline's mentioned already. I think kind of a lot of it comes down to authenticity and kind of how comfortable people feel to be themselves and own their difference in a space, and that includes wants. I loved your point, Caroline, about asking, and I often, you know, some of the agenda that comes through is how to clarify what you want in the first place, and then be able to ask for it in a way that feels like you're not asking for a favour, but you have a right. So I think the owning your difference is often an area that I explore when seeing women and feeling comfortable in that. Thank
you. So Sarah, I'm going to come to you next in terms of just your reflections on this.
Yeah. So thanks, Damion. I certainly resonate with the in service of others phrase Caroline used, and the authenticity. I suppose when I thought about it, I don't really see a lot of commonality in the headlines that people are coming to me with, but with the conversations that we're ending up having are about expectations, and I think we've heard that already, of themselves, of others, how reasonable they are, where they come from, how much they serve them now. So what I have found when I reflected on it is that as a result of that, the work they're doing is often on developing self-compassion and deepening and cultivating that for themselves, and also that sense of purpose, redefining purpose, not given to them by others, but shaping a purpose for themselves that they can work to. And I would say, regardless of the topic, often the work that I'm ending up doing with the coachee is that's the work they're doing. So that's what resonates for me here.
Thanks, Sarah. Helen, let's come to you.
I mean, all of the above. I'm nodding vigorously inside all the comments. I would just build on the topic of authenticity that Nish mentioned. In the environments in which I'm coaching, my colleagues are coaching, they are often systems that were built by men for men. That's not men's fault, it's just how it's been. And often the women we're coaching want to be authentically themselves, but they know there's a game to play. There are rules of the game in how things work in the organization in which they're in, but it doesn't feel authentic to them. So, for example, on the topic of collaboration, it can sometimes feel that the women want to be more collaborative, but it's not really how things are done. That will never be written down anywhere, but there is a sort of rule as to how things are divvied up and how things work, which then leads on to the topic of challenging difficult behaviours in others that go against your values. You're a senior woman, you have a role to play in setting the agenda in the firm, but yet how you want to work may not be how things are done around here. So I see that a lot as well.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. I mean, I'm reflecting on some coachees that I've been working with, And I definitely see the piece around authenticity, and I just wanted to bring a different reflection. Actually, just came to me is often as well. Again, generalization, but the skills that a female leader may bring. Something about a couple of clients I'm working with in a big organizational change happen. They're really bringing strong interpersonal capability in terms of the way that they're leading the teams and helping their team members really work through the change, which is actually being very heavily criticized by some of the other male leaders who just want to get the task done. So that sort of sense of that authenticity and giving themselves permission to really trust in their instincts has been something that I've been working with. So Helen, let's just, I suppose, building on this, in terms of they're the sort of the context that we're working in, what would you say your key learning has been as an executive coach from working in this area?
Yeah. I would say I've learned not to make assumptions about what's going on. So Caroline beautifully put it earlier about confidence. And there's this assumption that because you have a senior woman, there might be a confidence issue. Well, don't make that assumption is something that I've learned. I've also learned to be real about the circumstances these women are operating in. There is no magic wand. These are difficult environments, and it's about supporting the coachee often to navigate those difficult environments. So that's been a real learning for me, is to sort of notice the system that is operating and how this woman is having to operate and navigating that system. I've also learned, I think this is fairly universal, not always, but I've noticed this increasingly, that women tend to put their head down and hope that if they do a good enough job, they will be noticed and rewarded. And that will certainly take you to a certain level in an organization, but what got you there won't get you, much further in some respects. And so noticing that in women, how much are they putting themselves forward? I've just learned to be attuned to that when I'm coaching women, because they do a fantastic job of putting their head down, but often they don't get rewarded and noticed for it.
Thanks, Helen. Thank you. Sarah, just your reflections on that question?
Yeah, just a couple of things really, I suppose. And I think whilst gender may feel very prevalent in either how somebody comes to you or why they're there, I've one of my own learnings is it's best not to assume. I think the guys have said a bit about that already, not assume that this is important to the coachee. And different generations of women have grown up with, it's not a homogenous experience, but they have grown up with, some of our more senior women, it's about be like men and what have you. So it's important to let them come across what part of their experience is about gender for themselves. I suppose increasingly I'm becoming more aware of the intersectionality of gender and other parts of people, and how, particularly in very male-dominated organisations, that can stack up quite heavily and feel like a really challenging thing for women to carry, because it's not just about the gender piece. And I suppose finally, I was thinking from a sort of a reflective learning point of view. I certainly have had to work very hard on my own personal experience of gender bias can have a very influential impact on my own practice. So it's been a real challenge for me to work through that and look out for parallel processes and work through that in a reflective coaching sense, because some of my own experiences I know are informing that. So I suppose from a coaching point of view, my own learning is also about that. Pay attention to yourself, how you're showing up, what you're doing. And I know I have to pay a lot of attention in this space around that.
Thanks, Sarah. Thank you. It's Caroline, same question. What's been your key learning?
Absolutely echo that, Sarah. I think I quite often, perhaps senior women come to me as a coach because there's something in my journey that they've seen. So being able to be clear and honest with ourselves about those parallel processes is really crucial, and a journey's work forever, I'm sure. In terms of my key learning, I think it's been around so often around that balance between fitting in and women fitting into this structure and organisation and the behaviours of what's going on around them versus standing out, and which is actually the topic of a PhD a colleague of mine is starting, which is quite exciting. But this balance between fitting in and standing out is just becoming more and more apparent to me, really, in that if you don't fit in enough and you're too different and you stand out too much, then you almost get ejected and can't influence, can't have the impact that you want to have. But fitting in too much and not bringing that authenticity piece is crucial. So absolutely echo the authenticity piece there. I come with quite a strengths bias and background, so I'm always looking to help people with understanding who they really are and how they bring that in. So as Helen was talking about those rules and navigating, noticing the system, I did think how often actually my learning is around what's that wider system perspective for them as to what's going on, which often we can perhaps as individuals not see, because from within it can be hard when it's emotionally charged. So within that wider system perspective, I always think it's your difference that makes a difference. So how to bring that in, but know that you can't go too hard. So the key learning has been just how to support women, senior women, and sometimes men. Let's be honest, sometimes men is exactly the same things. But within that environment, working out how to bring their difference for the right impact and progress in the right way.
Thanks, Caroline. And Nish, coming to you, just in terms of your key learning.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been a lot of really valuable insights that resonate with me from Helen, Caroline, and Sarah. I think kind of when Helen started with "don't make assumptions," I think that's critical. And actually working in a space that's heavily male dominated at the moment, what I'm always struck by is how some of the themes that I've seen and we've commented on already translate across gender, but they manifest in different ways. So there's a chunk about the assumptions that I might make about the client in front of me, but I think there's also kind of how to support the women that we work with around the assumptions that they might be making about the people that they're engaging with, the system, what they can and can't do. And I think really nudging on that and almost the rules and the frame that they've set for themselves in their organisations or with their teams, it is part of where I've seen real difference in some of the coaching conversations I've had. What are the beliefs that we're taking in that kind of set the story before we've even tried to play? And the rules of the game, the analogy that Helen made before, actually, which I thought was a brilliant one, because I think there are unspoken rules, but I think we're in this lovely place where some of those can be challenged and changed. And it's how do you support, particularly the senior women that we work with, to be brave in doing some of that.
Yeah, thanks, Nish. So I feel like I'm sort of funneling us down, and I want to sort of build on this in terms of, so a lot of people listening to this call may be people that are training as coaches, maybe exploring their practice, and this being an area that they're interested in potentially operating in as an executive coach. So I suppose what advice would you give new coaches that may be interested in moving into this field? And Nish, I'll come to you with that question first, if that's okay.
Absolutely. I remember kind of about a decade ago when I was looking at my own authority as a coach and how do you establish authority. And I was working with, I was going to be meeting an experienced senior hire partner, and he had a reputation. And so before I went into the conversation, I was feeling slightly anxious anyway. And so I sat in supervision and I talked about, well, what's my authority? And as part of the conversation, my supervisor said to me, well, where's gender in your consideration of your authority? And I said, well, what do you mean? And she said, well, how do you reference gender when you're establishing your place in the room and in the conversation? And I said, well, I don't. It's obvious. And that conversation really challenged me and changed me in terms of, as a coach, how I approach my gender and how I bring it into the conversation and where and how I use it, actually. And I think there is something in terms of the advice I'd give to other coaches, which is to notice the role that gender plays for you and your approach and how you want to work with that. And kind of as much as we're talking about supporting our clients to be authentic, I think for me, it's using that to be authentic for yourself too. That's the biggest bit of advice. And it's not trying to play a role or meet the expectations you think your client's going to have when they come into the room. It's exactly what we've been talking about in reverse.
Thank you. Thanks, Nish. So Helen, same question. What advice would you give other coaches?
I would say educate yourself on the, I've used the word system about 10 times in this call, but on the system that operates. And because, as all the panelists have said, we're all bringing our own experiences to this, but I would just read a little bit more, understand a bit more about the challenges that a lot of women have to face. There is a brilliant book called The Authority Gap by Marianne Segar, and I must have read all the books about this stuff, so I'm reading them all the time. But that is a fantastic book that talks about literally the authority gap between men and women, from the home to school to workplaces to wider society. And it's just really, really eye-opening. So I would say educate yourself.
Thanks, Helen. Thank you. Sarah, it's over to you. Same question.
Yes, I think that's spot on, Helen, and I suppose I've gone a little bit further with that, but I agree with that. I've gone into something slightly more practical and said, you know, the woman's experience is by no means homogenous, but certainly in the workplace now, we're talking about menopause, we're talking about systemic bias, we're talking about some of those, and I know a lot of male leaders and male coaches who want to help women, and I would encourage them to do so. And you don't have to be an expert, but the cognizance around these things and the sense that what might be embedded is super important for me. And I suppose I would also say one of the challenges that the guys have talked about is how going into these conversations about how you noticing how you feel about, as Nish said, about those gaps, because the fit in, stand out, whose responsibility, being careful that we're not in a case where the women's situation is the problem to solve. And I think as it was, I think, for quite a lot of time, and maybe with good intention, but it's not the right solution. So I am seeing generations of women who are trying to really navigate that, and they don't have the role models because the previous generation of women had to do something very different. So understanding that those generations switch and change. And I suppose the other thing as well is to make sure that as with a lot of these challenges around potential biases, is that broader appreciation of what else might be at play here, not just in the system, but also about for the person. So
Lovely. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. And Caroline, same question. What's your advice?
Yeah, all of that. That was really good advice. Definitely. And as Helen was talking about educate yourself, I was thinking, obviously, you know, there's webinars and books and all sorts of things where you can go for easy education in this. But sometimes it's just about staying really, really curious. So really curious to what is that situation for that individual that you're coaching. They're pretty unique situations normally. The one top tip I've taken away from recent coaching actually has been about the importance of a three-way, if you can, in the setup with a line manager, when you can have that three-way, asking the line manager their perspectives in the setup, what they think the goals are for the senior woman that you're coaching. You get to pick up so much about this wider system, about the unwritten rules, about actually how they phrase things, the way they treat them. It's so rich. So I found real insight there that's really helped me to bring a different perspective or to see what that individual is noticing. And beyond that, I think it's just about the space you create as the coach. So that psychological safety for the coachee, as always, in any situation. What I find with senior women who are struggling with this, fitting in, standing out, trying to work out the unwritten rules, or the kind of extra layers that perhaps a senior man doesn't have to deal with, but they're in that environment with those people all the time. That you're trying to create a really safe place for that coachee to go in there thinking and feeling that they've not ever been allowed, they've never allowed themselves to go there or needed to go there, because the safe thing is to keep yourself in almost at that more surface level as a senior women in these organizations. So really about that psychological safety, creating that space, and so it's how you show up. And I'd say to new coaches in this perspective, it's how you show up, just curious, creating that safe space, and allowing that senior coachee, senior woman, to go to places they haven't perhaps explored before.
Thanks, Caroline. Thank you. So I'm noticing time is running away, and with a lot of these sessions, I always think, oh, God, I wish we had another half an hour. So I suppose there's a way of starting to close this conversation down. Just what else you'd like to add? You know, there may be a reflection that you want to share, or it may be another thought. Could be your sense of your hope for this work in the future. Who knows? Just what would you like to add as a way of closing this down? And Helen, would you be happy to go first if I came to you?
Yeah, the thing that comes to mind is coaching is sometimes given to women, senior women, to try and fix them. But increasingly, we're coaching men who want to change the system themselves. So I'm just cognizant of the idea that sometimes women are given coaching to help mold them into how they need to be. And I go back to that point about authenticity, and I always make it very clear, I'm not here to fix women. Women are the last people that need fixing, in my view, most of the time. And so just being conscious of how coaching was set up, how it was sold to the coachee. Yeah, there's something again about the system that individual is working in.
Thanks, Helen. Thank you. Caroline, if I come to you with that question, what else would you like to say?
What's occurring to me is about just taking the time for that real appreciation with the coachee of what they've already done. If you're coaching a senior woman in more of a generally a man's world, they've already achieved enormous things and probably don't recognise that in themselves. So the journey that they've already taken being absolutely crucial here. And there's a senior woman I was coaching quite recently who was worried about asking or putting herself forward for a promotion or putting herself in a particular situation. And then, you know, it was becoming clear to me that she was already this amazing role model in her organisation, but she just didn't recognise that. So helping them to see, I guess, and appreciate that they're already probably already made some groundbreaking progress to get to where they have, and how that would be seen from other perspectives.
Thanks, Caroline. Thank you. Sarah, how about you?
I'm going to go with the hope, if that's okay. I notice how tiring it can be to carry some of these hope expectations, being a role model, even if at times you don't want to be, or you feel a bit tired by that. My hope is that with the work and the focus and the, as Helen was saying, you know, the cognizance and the desire of sort of future generations to make this less of a thing, that it becomes a little bit less weighty for women and women in senior roles, and some of what they're doing can become far more acknowledged for what it is and have less around it. And if anything, as coaches, we can do to support that growth and to continue to reinforce that both with our male clients and our women clients, then I think that's good work to be doing. So yeah.
Thank you. And Nish, let's come to you. Just what else would you like to add?
I was just thinking, every night before my son goes to sleep, I say to him, "You're my favourite human." And I'm very deliberate in saying that he's my favourite human. And I guess my closing thought would be, people will come with challenges and aspirations, but it's always worth taking the time to know the human in front of you. And kind of, I think there have been times in my career I've been tempted to rush into, you know, what's a challenge, what's a task, what are we coaching towards? But I think there's so much benefit if you've got a coaching relationship and you're building a relationship with the person in front of you, which I think is key, to just take the time to know that human in front of you first and use that as the bedrock for all the work you do.
Thanks, Nish. Thank you. And you know, I just want to say a big thank you for, you know, sharing your experiences in this call. I mean, I'm leaving personally with a deep sense of the importance of this, you know, in this space that you're holding in your practice. I'm sure the people who are listening are holding in their practice, and this capacity we have as coaches to really connect the person to who they are, you know, as well as who they need to be. So thank you so much for your time. I hope that's been helpful to everyone who's been listening. Some lovely comments coming through now, so thank you for sharing those as well. Look forward to seeing you all again soon. We'll be together again on the 28th of October for our next webinar. Information will come out about that as well. So thank you, Nish, Helen, Sarah, and Caroline. Really, really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.